Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to almost 50% of first marriages. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Divorce Happens, a podcast to educate, inspire, support, and yes, make you laugh through divorce and beyond so that you can start fresh on the next phase of your journey. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh.
You get divorced. You get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce.
You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello, and welcome back to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, a little bit of laughter, and everything you need because, as we know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. And we're here today with one of our amazing experts, Nikki. Nikki, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki Innocent. I am the founder of the Inclusive Leadership Collective. I call myself a holistic career coach and leadership strategist. I work with people individually. So I like to say, so they don't hate their jobs and so they feel like they can be themselves in how they show up for work. But I also work on a larger level with organizations and communities to try to dismantle the systems of oppression that make us feel like we can't be the humans we are, with a specific lane on race, gender, and generational change in our society.
Yes, which is kind of plays into divorce in a lot of ways, right? And so, we talk a lot about accessibility in the workplace, and let's be honest, 50% of people are going to be divorced in the workplace, and we make it 0% accessible to them to get divorced and for what they need. So people are coming to work, Nikki. They have a big demand. Maybe they are the CEO. Maybe they are a manager, whatever it is. And then you're also struggling with the challenges of divorce, which is a full-time job in itself. So for somebody listening to this that feels completely overwhelmed with divorce and career, what can we do about this, Nikki? How can we help people?
Well, I think one of the things that Fresh Starts does so well is that we talk directly about divorce, but we also acknowledge that the experience of navigating divorce is the experience of navigating challenge that has been what I like to call whisper issues for so many of us, for so many aspects of our lives. And so I think taking the onus off of the pressure of divorce as, well, I need to solve this divorce thing, and really saying this is a really challenging thing that we as human beings go through, and we haven't been necessarily in our culture given permission to talk about or lean into or understand the multiple dynamics of it. No one divorce is the same as another. And I think the permission to understand that and give yourself grace in that even if someone gave you a blueprint, it's going to be different for you because you're different than that person, and the person that you're in a relationship is different. And if there are other people involved, that adds a whole nother layer here too. And so I think giving yourself just permission to say, I can learn from as many people as possible. And also I am the expert in my lived experience, and also the aspects of this experience that didn't work well, and how I need to show up at work. I think that's another part of this too, that we don't give ourselves permission because we were brought up in a work self and a life self model.
Yeah.
That's just not real.
No,
so I think you kind of approach it in two ways, internally and externally. But I think the first part is removing as much shame, or at least reframing the shame and judgment around it as this is part of life. And, as the Fresh Starts energy says, it's this is an opportunity to approach it a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what do we do? Let's just play a little board game here. Right. So you're going to get divorced. Maybe you ask for divorce, you start the proceedings. And what do you do in terms of work? Do you tell colleagues? Do you tell your manager? How do you start that movement?
Well, and I think one size fits all is a challenging and potentially dangerous for some people, because a lot of workplaces, and part of why I do what I do, is a lot of workplaces are not set up for people to be able to show up vulnerably. And so the level of permission for you to be yourself, to be safe around it. And so I think really understanding where are the pockets of opportunity where you felt okay enough to say I stubbed my toe, whatever version of the small version of unless you broke your toe and now you can't walk, that's not a small version of a stubbed toe. But you've had moments in your experience where there's been a little bit more of an open door to talk about things that are a little more vulnerable. I think saying oh yeah, tell your boss, if your boss is just, especially if your boss mirrors any part of the relationship you're in, oh my goodness, maybe that's not the place and space to do it. So I think, again, giving yourself that anchoring that I always think of, like, how can we make your spine feel a little bit stronger of stepping
Yeah.
into the environment, but then really kind of dipping a toe into the parts of your work that have felt safe enough for you to be human.
Mm.
There's a few, and I kind of wrote out a few things thinking that we were going to talk about this that are a little bit more actionable than like, it
Yes.
depends.
Yes.
So I think there's a part of this that's like acknowledging that it's a challenge in your life, acknowledging that it's grief, because
Yeah.
that's what it is, no matter how great and wonderful it is for you to be getting out of this situation, or, you know, how healthy it will be for you, or however we like silver lining it, you are going to be grieving some version of yourself or some version of
Yeah.
what you thought life would be. And then also, I think saying, so challenge, this is going to be tough. Okay, this is going to be something where emotions are going to pop up in a cycle that is not written ahead of time. And then the wild card part, like I might show up today one way and I have to juggle so many aspects of life that I've built a foundation on that foundation has crumbled. And so giving just that like juggle, like acknowledge it out loud. We're going to feel emotions, and we're also going to need to give ourselves permission to have to pivot, because I might have here's how I'm doing this divorce thing today, and then it's not in my control. So tomorrow I might need to adapt. So I think that those kind of three elements of saying it out loud, because I think so much is, again, why I talk about it with Hiroshi, so much of it's not said. And so people are like, either, oh my God, they can't handle this divorce, or like the divorce isn't bothering them at all. And everybody shows up a little differently. So I think that at least in the how you start, I will also say one of the things, if you can find a person within your organization, and I'm gonna go a little bit more positive. If your boss or your manager or somebody that is in a position of allocating your duties is someone you feel safe enough having a conversation with, doesn't need to be therapy, but you can say to them, like, here's what I think will be the most supportive for me. And I'm hoping that we can talk about this ahead of time, because I know that there are going to be pieces of this that are going to pop up that I'm not going to have control over. And so I think there are some people that when they're in these situations, they're like, I'm just going to need a little bit of patience and space. Yeah. And I might not have the answer right away. And there are some people, like, which I feel like is like every millennials movies about work, is like, I might need to just work harder through it. Like, I'm not going to deal with it. Right? And that's okay too, right? Saying that there's going to be different ways that I'm going to cope. And can we create a container that I can talk about that so that we can manage expectations together? And then I also think that also gives the, like, there might be extra tension in the room because there's tension in my life and I can't walking through the doors, whether they're virtual or literal. Like, I can't magically just shake all that up. I'm doing the best I can to do it. Right. But I just want to acknowledge that if there's something coming off of me, it's probably because I'm juggling a lot of things outside of it. And I want to create a space that we can talk about that. If you're feeling like there's a lot of tension and let's talk about a project that's not really tension filled, just be like, hey, I'm feeling this right now. Oh my God, thank you so much for acknowledging that. It just kind of decompresses a little bit. It kind of is that, I was thinking of like, everybody loved an Instapot, that part of the Instapot where you can like actually relieve that pressure. Having that conversation beforehand versus being in the heat of it just gives you like a key or a script to use in those moments where you are not going to be your best because you're going to be juggling so many things. And that's for the perfectionists again. And if you are somebody that identifies as a perfectionist or a people pleaser, these are the types of things that if we can talk about them ahead of time, we don't have the additional pressure of doing it perfectly when we're in that vulnerable situation.
Yes. And also what I found is the more you, especially with divorce, when you open up about it, so many people around you, right, are like, oh, I went through that when I was, my 20s or whatever. My sister going through a divorce, whatever. And, I think we are trying so hard to normalize it, right? And we just need to talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so that was all super, super good advice. And like, what about if they don't respond well to you?
Yeah. So, okay. And I love, Olivia, the last part that I had written was community, because I think that that's an interesting dance that you're trying to do, because again, we have the boundaries of work of like, are you my friend? Are you allowed to be my friend? Are you my manager? Are we friends? Like that dance of like somebody saying, yeah, that happened to me. But if you're in a position of power over me and you say that it happened to me, am I supposed to now listen to what your advice was about divorce? Like, what is that dance of finding, again, safe as possible people, but also knowing that not everybody's perspective, even if they're your boss or your boss's boss, is the we'll say the wise voice that you need in your corner in this particular part of life. Somebody who's really good at finance and accounting may not be the best at interpersonal relationships. And so allowing that to be like, okay, this is information and data that can come in. But then I think, again, like you were saying, finding the people that you feel safe enough to share or say out loud without, and again, for the people pleasers of the world and the
Yeah.
caretakers of the world, without feeling like that person needs to solve it or fix it, just sounding board. And maybe there's even a ritual of some sort that you release it from your body, or you just say, thank you so much. I just need to get that out of me. I
Right.
appreciate you witnessing my humanity right now. So I think there's that part. This ties back into the question of what if they don't like the answer, or they're like,
Yeah.
well, who cares?
Right.
Or even
Right.
worse, I worked at a place, Olivia, I don't think I've ever told you this. The place that I worked at for, I'll say, a very long time in my 20s, a big part of their selling point for people was that everyone was married and no one got divorced. That was literally in the recruiting process of bringing
Yeah.
people in
Okay.
their
Mm-hmm.
20s, that people got married by a certain point and no
Mm-hmm.
one got divorced. And that was like a badge of honor.
Okay.
And then while I was there, some of their people started getting divorced. And they're like,
Yeah.
shit, what do I do? And so I
Yeah.
think there's we want to Stepford wives ourselves and act like everything's
Mhm.
fine. And so you might get that response of like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
push through. It's not that hard. He was a good time at the
Yeah.
holiday party, or she was a great
Right.
time at, whatever.
Mhm.
I think giving and understanding that has nothing to do with you. That's other people projecting their own shit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. And it doesn't mean it doesn't make
Yeah.
it more complicated, but allowing for that to not mean that you are bad or that you shouldn't trust yourself.
Yep.
But there are a whole bunch of things that come up when you're talking about divorce, whether it's religious, societal, interfamilial, if they're going through
Right.
the same thing, or they went through it, or, you
Yep.
never know if somebody's partner asked them for a divorce and they were like, we don't believe in that. There was a guy that I dated that told me, he was like, I didn't get divorced because I was told that forgiveness is the answer. And I was like, okay, but have you left a job before? Because again,
Right.
like a lot of these things are about how do you handle something that is beyond repair? Are
Right.
you allowing yourself to release that? So it's
Mhm.
much bigger than a job. So
Yeah.
again, the human you are, not the human doing, but the human being,
Yeah.
realizing that this workplace is really about you being a productivity engine, at least traditional workplaces.
Yeah. Yeah.
So allowing that, I'm like, allowing that to set the stage, and then going back to that community that you have, whether that is within your workplace
Yeah.
or maybe it's past, like people in your alumni of some version of
Mhm.
something,
Mhm.
your network that might be outside of this place, even a journal. If you don't have
Mhm.
any person, like allowing yourself to be that, so it
Yeah.
can get out of you, so you're not carrying around other people's shit, because that's what happens
Mhm.
oftentimes is we're carrying the
Mhm.
baggage of that bad response, but it was
Yeah.
never our business in the first place.
Yeah.
HR potentially could be helpful. You can talk to a coach. I mean, I'm not trying to like pitch myself, but like
Well, we do want you to
I
pitch
work
yourself.
with people on scripts of this stuff all the time,
Yep.
because so often, at least this is how I coach, I believe you have the answer to these things and nobody's created the container for you to be able to test it out and hear it, or
Right.
even witness yourself say it. And so trying to find those types of spaces, because you know inside yourself what needs to be said, but
Yeah.
so many layers have told you that you can't be trusted, or you're not
Mhm.
high,
Mhm.
your hierarchy in your organization means that your voice doesn't matter, all those types
Yeah.
of things. And again, going back to the beginning, this is all about being human and advocating for yourself and asking for what you need and allowing people to help, but
Yeah.
also like not assuming that you need to do, I mean, again, we were taught like in a obedient school system of like,
Mhm.
memorize this thing, do this
Yeah.
thing.
Right, bro.
And that is not what living as a human being in 2024
No.
is, 2025 and beyond. Like,
Mm.
we are fingerprints. We need to
Mhm.
acknowledge that reality.
Yeah, and it really can be as simple as like you just want to let them know because you might have to take a few days off here or
Yeah.
there,
Oh,
or
yes.
you might have to pick your kids up early or whatever, right? Like it doesn't have to be like I love your suggestion of like your community doesn't have to be there, right? It can be
Yeah.
other places. So what can you go into a little bit more detail about what you do with clients and how you could support people through divorce?
Yeah. So I work with people, and usually at this point on an individual level, if you're sitting here being like, oh my God, you can work. I do at this point, I do one-off sessions. So you can book a session with me. I do a prelim session at the moment where it's a discounted version. So
Hmm.
you can kind of get a sense for me. The good thing is what you're listening to right now or watching to right now, or you find me on social media, like I'm disturbingly consistent. So if you like that, that's what it'll be.
She is. She is.
Yeah, it's amazing. People are like, Nikki, I've never met anybody that's the same as they are online. I'm like, that's so much work.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
want to play
know.
another
I don't know how
part.
to do that either.
Yeah, it's a waste.
Yeah.
So anyway, you can do kind of a mini session with me. We can do a longer form session. And one of the things I love about my longer form sessions is I record them. not for me. I mean, I have it if you need it, but like it's for you to watch yourself because we don't have those opportunities. And you are so much more powerful than your emotions and your real-time narrative will give you the ability to see. So what we do in those is you talk with me for 60 minutes. We talk about wherever you kind of want to go. We come out with scripts, we come out with specific resources for you. And then you have that in your back pocket, but you have the ability to kind of come back in for more. We have packages as well that can kind of create a container for you.
Yeah.
I have a podcast that might be useful as a resource. That's a free resource, definitely. I speak at different things as well. And so if you have an organization or something that you want me to come speak at, that's a wonderful way to create the opportunity for a conversation that will then connect you to your community. So like use me. Even as clients of mine, I'm always like, blame me if you're like, this is so awkward, but my coach is making me ask people to be my friend. Like, not really, but whatever that looks like, use me as that example to advocate for yourself. Cause sometimes it can feel awkward.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
So again, I think one of the words, I don't know if I've said this to you before, but like sistering support. So sistering in architecture is this idea that when there is a particular beam of a house or a structure that has a lot of pressure on it, all they do is they take another beam and they put it right next to it. The whole point of it is so that it can lean some of that pressure onto it. And so find the opportunities in your life for sistering support. And I try to be that both because I am a sister, but also I think that, at least the world that I'm working towards is that we all have the opportunity to say, hey, can I just lean on you for a second? You don't have to carry me. You don't have to fix it. But sometimes life is really hard to carry on my own, especially when something like your family is going through turmoil or complete change or your own identity is shifting. Like that is where that sistering support is important.
I love that. And of course, you can find all of Nikki's information in the show notes. Before we let you go, Nikki, if somebody's listening to this and they're going through a divorce, what would be some words of encouragement you could leave them with?
I'll say the first thing, my own personal piece is I am a adult child of divorce. And so I am a 38-year-old living example of it's a really beautiful thing when your parents are allowed to make a decision that's good for their relationship and therefore creates an environment where you can live a more healthy and functional life in the relationships with each of them. So if you are a parent in particular, living embodiment of the fact that divorce actually gives you the permission to not only like yourself a little bit more, but it gives you empathy for other people. And then for you as an individual, not just, hey, parents, like that you make it through hard things. You are the only person who has to be here for every moment of your life. And so really understanding, honoring, and trusting that you are the wise one, you are the expert that can get more information. We all learn. We are students of life, right? But trusting yourself and building that relationship is probably the best relationship you'll have in your life. I always say, like, the more I learn, the more I fall in love with myself, even as I find out the things that are a little bit weak. So I think that this process in particular is a boot camp of self-awareness. And self-discovery.
I love that. Thank you so much, Nikki. We value you so much and we appreciate all of your wisdom and the way you see the world. And so if anybody is looking for the support, like she said, to just kind of like get through this transitional time, please reach out to Nikki. Nikki, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Olivia.
Divorce Happens is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the only divorce registry platform for everything you need to begin again, including home items, hype team, and everything in between. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh. We're here to support you before, during, and after divorce. Head to freshstartsregistry.com for more info.